lower your voice, dim your lights, because this is not just a story. It's about a disobedience child. In Umuok village, there are children who are born into laughter, and there are children who are born into silence. Janet was born into silence. Before she could clearly pronounce her own name, death had already memorized it. Her father was the first to leave. He was a quiet man, a hunter who knew the forest paths like lines on his palm. One morning, he entered the bush before sunrise, carrying his cutlass and charms, promising to return before nightfall. He never did. They found him at dusk, lying beneath an irako tree, not crushed by accident. The elders said the tree had fallen the wrong way. The hunters said the wind did not blow that day, and the forest said nothing. Janet was barely 3 years old when her mother wrapped her father's body in cloth soaked with tears. That was the first funeral Janet attended. But it would not be the last. After her father's death, her mother changed. She spoke less. She slept less. She coughed more. At night, she would sit upright on her mat, staring into darkness, whispering prayers to ancestors who did not answer. Some evenings, she would hold Janet tightly and say, "My child, do not ever wander alone. The world listens to lonely footsteps." 2 rainy seasons later, Janet's mother began coughing blood. First it was hidden, spat into cloth, buried into the soil. But sickness does not respect secrets. One morning, Janet woke up and found her mother lying still, eyes open, staring at a corner of the hut like she was seeing something Janet could not see. By sunset, Janet had no parents. In Umuok village, people do not cry loudly for orphans. They whisper. They whisper because they believe death listens, and lonely children attract attention. Women shook their heads. Men avoided. From that day on, Janet stopped being Janet. She became the orphan. Aunty Mornike was her mother's elder sister. She did not smile often. She did not laugh loudly, and she feared the forest more than hunger. When she agreed to take Janet in, she did not celebrate. She simply said, "Let her stay. Blood must not scatter." Mornike's hut stood at the edge of the village, too close to the Umuok bush. A bush so old that even the elders could not remember when it first became forbidden. Children were warned never to play near it. Hunters entered only with charms. And at night, the bush breathed. Janet noticed things the first week she arrived. How dogs refused to follow her near the trees. How birds went silent when the wind blew from the forest. How her auntie always locked the door before sunset. One evening, Janet asked softly, "Auntie, why do you fear the bush?" Mornike froze. She did not answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost respectful. Because some places remember insults longer than humans remember kindness. Short silence. Life with Aunty Mornike was strict. Janet swept before sunrise, fetched water without complaint, spoke only when spoken to. She obeyed because obedience was the only thing she still owned. But at night, Janet dreamed. She dreamed of roots crawling like fingers. She dreamed of the ground opening its mouth. She dreamed of a flat stone, warm, breathing, calling her name. Each time she woke up screaming, Aunty Mornike would sprinkle water at the doorway and mutter prayers under her breath. One evening, just as the sky began to bleed orange, Mornike called Janet to her side. Her hands were shaking. She pointed toward the forest. "Listen to me carefully, child." The wind stopped. "Inside that bush, there is a stone." She swallowed. "A flat stone. Smooth. Old." Janet nodded. "If your stomach troubles you there, if you are ever forced into that bush, do not sit on that stone." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Not urine. Not waste. Not even your shadow." Janet felt cold. "People who ignore that warning," Mornike said, "do not always come back as people." That night, Janet dreamed of the stone again, but this time, smiled. The morning Aunty Mornike left the house, the sky was dull. Not dark, not bright, just waiting. She wrapped her cloth tightly around her chest and tied her headscarf with hands that trembled slightly. Janet watched her from the doorway, holding a broom. "I will return before nightfall," Mornike said, but her eyes avoided the bush. She turned back suddenly and gripped Janet's shoulders. "Do not wander," she warned. "Do not follow hunger into foolishness. And do not go near the forest unless death pushes you." Janet nodded quickly. She always nodded. The sound of Mornike's footsteps faded down the red earth path. And with it, the house became quiet. Too quiet. Pause. 3 seconds. Janet swept the compound, fetched water, washed the plates. By midday, the sun burned hot, but her stomach began to twist. First, it was a small pain, a whisper. Janet ignored it. Hunger was not new to her, but the pain grew teeth, turned sharp, deep, unforgiving. She sat on the floor, pressing her belly, breathing slowly the way her mother once taught her. The pit toilet was far, too far. The pain struck again, harder. Janet whimpered. She looked toward the bush. The bush did not move, but it felt aware. Low wind rises slightly. She remembered her auntie's warning. She remembered the stone. Her legs shook. Another wave of pain hit her, forcing tears from her eyes. Sometimes, disobedience does not come from rebellion. Sometimes, it comes from desperation. Janet grabbed a small cloth and stepped outside. Each step toward the forest felt heavier than the last. The ground changed beneath her feet. The air cooled suddenly. As she crossed the invisible boundary into the bush, the sounds of the village died behind her. No birds, no insects, only her breathing. And something else, something slow. Janet pushed past hanging vines and thorny branches, wincing as they scratched her skin. Then, she saw it. The stone, flat, white, dark like it had been soaked in night. It sat alone, surrounded by twisted roots, as though the earth itself was holding it in place. Janet stopped walking. Her stomach clenched violently. She doubled over, crying quietly. Her auntie's voice echoed in her head. "Do not sit on that stone." Janet looked around. The forest stared back. There was no wind now, no movement, just stillness so thick it pressed against her ears. Her body betrayed her. Her legs shook. Her vision blurred. She whispered, "Just this once," and she sat. The moment her body touched the stone, the world changed. The air dropped, heavy, thick, wet. The ground vibrated slightly, not like an earthquake, like breathing. The stone beneath her was not cold. It was warm, too warm. Janet froze. A sharp smell rose from the earth, old soil, rot, and something ancient. She finished quickly, shaking, heart pounding. As she stood up, she felt it. The stone pulsed, once, twice, as if acknowledging her. A low sound crept through the ground. Not loud, not angry, satisfied. Janet stumbled backward, wiping her hands on her cloth. Her chest felt tight. She turned to run. And that was when she heard it. Footsteps, not hers. Slow, bare, heavy. Crunch, pause, crunch, matching her rhythm. But coming from behind. Janet ran. Branches slapped her face. Roots grabbed her ankles. The forest did not guide her out. It delayed her. The footsteps never hurried. They followed impatiently. When Janet burst out of the bush, she fell to the ground, gasping for breath. The village sounds returned suddenly, goats, distant voices. She scrambled up and ran home, slamming the door behind her. That night, when Auntie Mornike returned, Janet did not greet her. She sat in the corner, silent, her eyes unfocused. At midnight, Janet laughed, not loudly, not happily, just once, dry, cracked, as if someone else was testing her voice. And from the direction of the bush, the stone waited. That night, sleep did not come easily to Janet. She lay on her mat, staring at the ceiling, listening. Every sound felt close, too close. Auntie Mornike snored softly on the other side of the room. But even that familiar sound felt distant, as though Janet was already somewhere else. Her stomach no longer hurt. Instead, there was a heaviness inside her, like something had settled. Janet turned on her side. That was when she heard it. A soft scraping sound. Not inside the hut. Beneath it. Like fingers dragging slowly across packed earth. She held her breath. The sound stopped. Then she felt it. The ground beneath her mat shifted. Just slightly. Janet sat up. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure it would wake her auntie. She whispered, "Auntie?" No answer. The scraping sound returned, closer now. Then came a whisper. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakably her name. "Janet." She covered her ears. The whisper continued. "Sit again." Sudden silence. Janet screamed. Auntie Mornike jolted awake, shouting her name. The sound vanished instantly as though it had never existed. Janet shook uncontrollably. She pointed at the floor, crying. Something is under the ground." Mornike did not laugh. She stood slowly and reached for white chalk, drawing symbols at the doorway, murmuring prayers under her breath. That was when she noticed Janet's feet. They were swollen, darkened, as if the earth had begun claiming them. By morning, Janet was no longer the same child. She did not speak unless spoken to, and when she did, her voice dragged, like it was being pulled through soil. She followed her auntie around the compound without blinking. Her shadow lagged behind her movements. When she stopped, it swayed. That afternoon, Auntie Mornike called neighbors. The women whispered. The men avoided Janet's eyes. One old woman spat on the ground and said, "This child has stepped where she was not invited." Janet tilted her head suddenly. She smiled. "The stone knows me now." Silence fell like a cloth over the compound. Mornike grabbed Janet's shoulders. "What stone?" Janet laughed softly. "The one that breathes." That night, Janet did not sleep. She sat upright on her mat, eyes wide open. Her lips moved constantly, whispering, answering questions no one asked. At exactly midnight, she stood, walked to the doorway, and pressed her bare feet into the soil outside. The ground responded. It rippled, as if recognizing weight it had missed. Janet smiled. From beneath the earth, something smiled back. Auntie Mornike screamed and dragged Janet inside, locking the door. She sprinkled water. She prayed. She wept. Janet turned slowly. Her eyes were not empty. They were full. "You locked the door," Janet said calmly. "But you did not move the stone." Her voice was layered. Not one. Many. The lantern flickered violently. The walls creaked. Outside, the bush exhaled. Long. Deep. Satisfied. The next morning, Janet's footprints were found outside the hut, leading away, stopping abruptly, as if she had been lifted. Auntie Mornike collapsed to her knees. "You warned me," she whispered to the forest. "I warned her." The wind blew once, from the direction of the stone. By morning, fear had spread through Umuok village. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that makes people sweep their compounds twice and avoid eye contact. Auntie Mornike did not sleep. She sat outside her hut with ash on her head, staring toward the forest like a woman awaiting judgment. Janet sat beside her. Still. Too still. Her feet were swollen further now, the skin tight and dark, cracked like dry earth in harmattan. When Mornike touched them, Janet did not react. She only said softly, "It is pulling me gently." That was when Mornike screamed for the elders. They arrived one by one. Old men whose backs were bent not by age alone, but by secrets. Women whose mouths had spoken prayers longer than they had spoken laughter. They came with cowries, with chalk, with fear. When Janet saw them, she smiled. "You are late," she said. The eldest man, Papa Ikena, froze. His walking stick slipped from his hand. "She knows," he whispered. They formed a circle around Janet. No one touched her. Papa Ikena asked carefully, "Child, where did you sit?" Janet tilted her head. "On the seat you abandoned." A sharp intake of breath went around the circle. One elder began to cry. Another spat on the ground repeatedly, whispering, "It has remembered us." They told the story then. a story not spoken in generations. Long before Umuok became a village, before houses had doors, the land belonged to something older than names. An earth spirit, not evil, not kind, but strict. It demanded respect. It demanded offerings. And it demanded that its seat never be defiled. During a great famine centuries ago, the people made a promise and broke it. They stopped the sacrifices. They abandoned the stone. They walked away, but the spirit did not leave. It waited, patient, buried. The stone is not just a stone, Papa Ikena said. It is a throne. Janet laughed. The ground beneath her feet shifted slightly. And thrones do not forget, she added. The elders attempted a cleansing. They drew symbols. They chanted prayers. The wind pushed back, hard. The chalk lines smudged themselves. Janet's shadow rose from the ground, standing while she sat. One elder fell unconscious. Another vomited soil. Papa Ikena dropped to his knees. "We failed you," he whispered to the earth. "Do not take the child." Janet stood. Slowly, her feet sank slightly into the soil. "She is already taken," she said. She sat. She marked. She answered. Her voice echoed from beneath them. The elders knew then. This was no possession. This was acceptance. That night, the village sealed the paths leading to the bush. Drums were silenced. Children were locked indoors. Janet was placed in the center of the compound, surrounded by symbols meant to hold spirits. She hummed softly, a tune no one recognized. As the moon rose, the earth responded. Low, deep, hungry. Janet looked toward the forest and whispered, "I am coming back." That night, Umuok village did not sleep. The air was heavy. The bush seemed to breathe. Janet sat in the middle of the compound, surrounded by the chalk symbols the elders had drawn earlier. Her bare feet rested lightly on the earth, swollen, cracked from her ordeal. Aunty Mornike knelt nearby, her hands pressed together, whispering prayers she had long forgotten. "Please, please spare her," she murmured. "Do not take her. She is all I have left." The wind shifted. It carried the smell of the bush, wet earth, old soil, and something ancient. Janet looked toward the forest. "It is waiting," she whispered, shivering. "I can feel it, but I am not afraid." The earth pulsed beneath her, low, deep, as if it were breathing. The elders formed a circle around her. Papa Ikena spoke, voice trembling. "Child, if it chooses to take you, blink, and it will spare your soul." Janet closed her eyes and whispered softly, "I did not come to harm. I only came because I had no choice." The ground beneath her feet quivered. Roots rose slightly, twisting like fingers reaching for her. Janet held her breath. The air was heavy with anticipation. Then, something remarkable happened. A warm exhale rose from the soil. It was slow, gentle, merciful. The pulse of the earth softened. "You were warned." The voice seemed to murmur from the ground. "You acted from need and not malice. You may leave." Janet opened her eyes. Aunty Mornike rushed forward, tears running down her cheeks. The earth lifted Janet gently, almost guiding her forward, as if showing her the path. Her swollen feet healed as she stepped on solid ground. Her body felt lighter, freed from the oppressive weight of the forest. Janet looked back once. The stone lay there, still, but calm, no longer threatening. "Thank you," she whispered softly. Aunty Mornike held her tightly. "Never, never again," she said. "I will guard you always." The elders nodded. The wind returned to its normal rhythm. The forest no longer seemed angry, only watchful. Janet and Aunty Mornike walked back toward the village together. The villagers watched in silence. No one spoke. No one laughed. But everyone felt the relief in the air. Janet had been spared. The earth spirit had judged her heart. And in that mercy, the village learned a lesson older than their ancestors. Some warnings are for the living, but mercy belongs to those who respect them. Janet returned. She was not the same child, but she was alive. And sometimes, even in the darkest places, Respect and courage can call forth mercy.